What's going on, Dolphins fans? Welcome back to the Fins Up Network. It's Ben Morgan, and it's another tough one for us Dolphins fans. For the second straight week, falling on the wrong side of the scoreboard. This time 23-17 to the Chargers. As always, I want to hear your top takeaways from the Dolphins' loss here to the Chargers. But before I get started on mine, I gotta give my hat's gotta be taken off. I'm not even wearing one. It's already been taken off to those Chargers for essentially doing what we couldn't do. They figured out a way to win. Look at all the injuries they battled through. They had the perfect game plan to shut down this Dolphins offense. They kept their postseason hopes alive. And now, yeah, we're still okay. We're still the sixth seed. But you can't help but just feel deflated after that game against the Niners, this game against the Chargers. And now you've got at Buffalo on deck on a short week, not being able to control your own fate, being two down to the Bills, just a kind of a deflating feeling. So I hate to start on such a negative note, but props, hats off to the Chargers for taking care of business, something that we couldn't do. But I want to get to my top takeaways and recap from the game because the first thing we've seen it now 2 weeks in a row. Has the offense been figured out? And if you go back to the second half of the Houston game, go back another week, our offense has just been nothing recently. Defenses, what are they doing? They're taking away the middle of the field, and we look absolutely lost. Our timing's off. Our wide receivers are covered. We have no run game right now that we can rely on. What's it boiled down to? Well, we need to switch things up. And I talked about a short week against Buffalo, but there's no other option at this point in time. If you're Mike McDaniel and if you're going to play the Buffalo Bills now in Buffalo, and there's going to be some weather in the forecast, we got to change things up. What do you do? What do you got to do differently? More sweeps, more screens, more out routes. We saw Jalen Waddle have success with an easy out route. Do something like that. Think about what the Chargers did to us. We used to give Tua, everyone used to give Tua so much shit for doing this dink and dunk. Well, look at what Herbert did the entire night. Threw the ball a million times, completed 500,000. I mean, he was dinking dunking all night, and when the shot play was there, he was taking it. But we just didn't have that. So maybe you incorporate a little bit more of that dink and dunk. Get those fast guys going on some jet sweeps. But regardless, there's been enough tape out right now of our offense having success that defenses are reacting, defensive coaching staffs are reacting, and we saw the Chargers do that. And think about what the Chargers were working with. No Derwin James, no Bryce Callahan, no J.C. Jackson. We came into that game thinking this is 300 plus. This is 3 touchdowns for Tua. He's going to be back in the MVP race. We're winning this game. 10 completions, less than 150 passing yards against that banged up defense. Not acceptable. We need to get something going here because that's not going to work out very well against the Bills next week. I'll be the first one to say that to you right now. My next takeaway, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. So you basically have a battle of what's going on here. Is it the defensive philosophy, or are we just simply putting the defense on the field too much? Let's start with the defensive philosophy. We're seeing the zero. We've seen this numerous times now this season. We're running a zero blitz on third down, like third and short, and we're having pressure way off. We're putting our cornerbacks off. How many times did that kill us? How many times is that going to kill us until we change something? Now we go to seeing this is not zero blitz related, but just Xavier Howard related. Dude's been a stud for us forever. He had a couple of rough ones here and there, but he starts tailing Mike Williams and some decent success, a couple of failures. Mike Williams is a big, good wide receiver. You expect Mike Williams to win some of those. But on that deep shot where Herbert places it perfectly over Howard, the least Howard could do is touch the guy. So now it's maybe if it's a philosophy related thing or it's an execution thing, those things are killing us. And then one more thing, philosophy wise, what did we see at the end of the first half? We see a third and goal from like the 16 or 17, and we put all of our defenders essentially at the goal line. You do a dump off to Austin Eckler. He gets the ball down to the 1 yard line. And yeah, he's going to score from there. He scores. You go into halftime giving up a possession. And then since the Chargers got the ball back to start the second half, they almost got to double dip on that. Luckily, they didn't. But that's the situation you put yourself in. So a lot of it is scheme, a lot of it's execution, which obviously hasn't been great, but it's complemented in the wrong way by the offense not sustaining drives, and that's where the on the field thing comes too much. Listen to this. 7 of our 11 drives were under 6 total plays. And now you think that's okay if we're this high scored flying offense like we were against the Lions and against the Texans, against the Browns, against the Bears. That's fine if we're having shorter drives then. But at the end of the day, When you're not scoring, we literally shouldn't have scored in the first half if it wasn't for that fluke play by Tyreek. Awesome play, by the way. I was speechless. We didn't deserve that by any means, but unbelievable. But essentially, when you're doing that, you're putting your defense on the field too much. And now, if you look, once the game's over, Chargers run 78 plays, we run 49. Time of possession, 49 and 39 and change to 20 and change. So they have essentially had the ball for double the amount of time that we did. So I don't see it as one major fix. I don't know if it's the philosophy or if it's being on the field too much. I honestly think it's a layered issue. I think there's components of both, but just like I said about the offense, that needs to get fixed ASAP. Short week, Bills in Buffalo. It's not getting any easier. I got a couple of miscellaneous takeaways I want to throw in here as well. Kind of all over the board on this one. When we go empty set, we essentially can't. We need to have someone standing next to Tua. We need to have someone going in motion at the very least to cause some sort of distraction to the defense. Because unless it's at the very end of the game, if we go empty set, if it's not out of his hand real quick, either the offensive line is crumbling or the blitz is getting home and it just ends up in a terrible place. So empty set woes are just unbelievable so far right now. On a bit of a bright side, Christian Wilkins, 9 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss. The dude is constantly penetrating those gaps. That first half, it's hard to stand out as a defensive tackle in this league. We see elite players like Ndamukong Suh back in the day and Aaron Donald. Christian Wilkins had a half, and he did fine in the second half as well. But his constant penetration and his hustle needs to be brought up. That guy is going to absolutely get paid, get paid, get paid. Offensive line, you can see that Teron Armstead, he's battling through it. Props to him for playing, but at what point does playing injured end up being the bad thing, being the wrong thing versus a guy that's healthy and that could be out there? He got beat by Kyle Van Noy. I think it was Van Noy's first sack of the season. On that sack, he had a notable missed run block in the second half on a play that looked like it might be going somewhere for Mostert, and it turned into like a 1-yard gain. And then on the sack that Robert Jones allowed, which Robert Jones looked like a turnstile on that one, the whole entire left side of the line collapsed. Teron Armstead got put on his back on that play as well. So it wasn't the most encouraging thing. There were good reps by Teron Armstead as well. I'm not trying to completely dog him. You can just tell he was hurt. Let's just put it that way. Speaking of playing hurt, Tyreek, big props to him as well for fighting through that ankle injury, literally going to the sideline every time the offense would be done and getting that like pad, whatever the heat or the ice, whatever they said they were putting on him to keep that to keep him fresh, to keep him loose on that, and then being kind of just monitored throughout drives as well, like playing a couple of plays, coming back off, to be able to go through that, to have 2 50-plus yard touchdowns in that game. Like I said, one was a little bit fluky, but regardless, it's a 50-yard touchdown. Big props to him, but once again, something to monitor on a short week. But I want to wrap up my thoughts, my takeaways with a positive shout out from the game, because Jalen Phillips played like a man possessed. 6 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. Should have been 2 sacks. I hope you guys were just as fired up as I was. I had to do some pacing. I had to do some pacing around the house on that roughing the passer, if that's what we want to call it, on that call, because everything about that play was spot on. We saw him rushing hard along the edge almost every single one of his pass rush attempts. And then he acted like he was going to do that, spun off that guy, and the sack was right there. And that's what we had talked about Jalen Phillips even back when he was drafted. Like, there's certain edge rushers that come out of college and they're raw, but they're naturally good. Either they're quick or they've got power. Jalen Phillips was a calculated pass rusher, and that was a perfect example of being a calculated pass rusher, setting up moves earlier in the game so that you can land one later in the game. And he did that just perfectly in the phantom call for putting his body weight on him or whatever it was. Like I said, I don't want to bitch too much about the officiating, but that was a top 3 roughing the passer call that I've ever seen, of being a bad call, I should say. But his 2 tackles for loss, I don't want to blow by those either, because they were perfect examples of him becoming this complete edge rusher and just defensive end, because the run was going his opposite way. And what did he do? He knew the play action boot wasn't coming along, so he just scoops right down the line of scrimmage, exactly like you're supposed to do. Got both of those running backs from behind on both of those plays. So him, Christian Wilkins, constantly hustling, constantly making plays like that. Got to give some credit. We did have some positives from this game. Not quite as many, as you can tell probably by the tone of my voice today. Not as pumped about this one. However, that is my recap and takeaways from this. I've got a lot more thoughts, but I wanted to at least get this recorded tonight while the emotions were still going through me. But like I said, drop your comments, drop your thoughts, takeaways in the comments, and then we can chat more about it then as well. But man, we're on to Bills week. It's been a rough couple of weeks. We got out of that we're out of the West Coast. Let's put it that way. It was 0-2, but now we're going to shit weather on the East Coast. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. That's what I've got for today, Miami Dolphins fans. Let's get through this one and on to Buffalo. Fins up.